Help support the show by joining the Patreon or becoming a YouTube member. Also, hit that like button and subscribe if you want more Browns-focused content.
Hey, what's up, y'all? Welcome to Q&A, the show where I take your questions and answer. And a lot of y'all went straight from watching that Thursday night football game into my question and answer prompt because so many questions were about how Joe Flacco looked with the Bengals. We'll talk about it, man. Luke Reed says, how Joe Flacco looking this way and beating the Steelers right after we looked awful against them? Are there any other quarterbacks? Are any of our quarterbacks actually bad, or is it just Kevin muzzling them? I'd love to see what Dillon Gabriel, Shadeur look like coached by literally anyone else. So, again, this is just kind of like, first thing I want to say before responding to this question. I don't think we have to work this hard to blame Kevin Stefanski for the offense, right? I don't think you have to work this hard to come to a conclusion that you want to fire Kevin Stefanski because of how the offense looks. All those things are perfectly, you're able to come to a conclusion by just watching the Browns on Sunday and judging Kevin by the games that he's actually coaching in, right? I'm not a big fan of judging a coach from something that happened in a completely different game because it's not the same, right? The Browns played Pittsburgh in Pittsburgh. Cincinnati played Pittsburgh at home on a Thursday night, which has always been a big advantage for the home team. Mike Tomlin's like 2-19 or something crazy like that in road Thursday night games. Also on the flip side, Mike Tomlin was lost one time in the home game against Cleveland. So these are two completely apples to oranges situations. Also, like the offenses that Joe Flacco's playing with versus the Browns and the Bengals, it's just completely different. When he had 33 targets to just Jamar Chase and T. Higgins alone, I think 24 of those targets were to Jamar Chase and 10 were to T. Higgins. So no, 23 targets were to Jamar Chase, 10 were to T. Higgins. So that right there is the big difference. I've been getting a lot of questions this week after this game about why it is that Joe Flacco looks different. And I think the obvious answer, regardless of how you feel about Joe Flacco or Kevin Stefanski, and again, I'm more on the side of at this point, you have to fire Kevin unless he showcases something extraordinary. But the answer to why Joe Flacco looks different is obvious. It's not because the offensive coordinator is any different. It's not because the offense is that different. It's because he has Jamar Chase, who he can spam the ball 23 times to and still produce 165 yards of offense with. That's the big difference. And I know some people are like, well, why don't we have a Jamar Chase on our roster? Jamar Chase is one of 5 people in the NFL, I think, that can do what Jamar Chase did. And I honestly think Jamar Chase is the best wide receiver in football. So yeah, they got Jamar Chase. That's the difference to me. That's why I don't feel like it's even a good exercise to sit here and be like, well, Joe Flacco had 340 yards with the Bengals and he didn't do that with the Browns, because it's like, yeah, he has Jamar Chase, somebody you can be very uncreative with, just throw the ball to, and he's so damn good at wide receiver. He's the best wide receiver in all of football that he can produce when you throw him the ball 24 times. There's not a single player on this team the Browns can give the ball to on offense 24 times. We don't got a running back you could do that with and expect 165 yards of offense and a touchdown. We don't have a tight end or a wide receiver with. I don't think we got to work this hard. Again, if your whole point is that you think Kevin Stefanski should be fired based on how the offense looks in Cleveland, you don't have to go outside the range of the games that Kevin's not involved with to make that point. You can just make the point by pointing to Kevin's body of work over the last calendar year. I think it's loud enough to justify moving on from him at the end of the season. But to sit here and be like, oh, well, Joe Flacco looks amazing now, while we're ignoring that he's throwing the ball 23 times to Jamar Chase, I think it's wild to me that people are just ignoring that Jamar Chase exists in this equation. The amount of questions again that I'm getting about why it looks different, and nobody's coming to the conclusion that the obvious thing is obviously true, which is Jamar Chase is fucking amazing at football. Like, let's be real here. If Joe Flacco wasn't 40, we wouldn't be making this about Joe Flacco. If Joe Flacco didn't get traded, we wouldn't be making this about Joe Flacco. This is clearly about Jamar Chase. This is obviously about the greatness of Jamar Chase. That being said, again, if you want to fire Kevin, we don't got to play these mental gymnastic games. We could just look at what Kevin has done over the last calendar year to justify firing Kevin. I just find it as a useless exercise, right? Like, was this going to change anybody's mind if Joe Flacco looked bad in the Bengals offense? Was anybody going to circle back around and be like, oh my God, Kevin's actually a genius? No, and they shouldn't, because that would be stupid, right? So I just don't get the exercise here. Like, you could come to that conclusion without throwing on all this unnecessary stuff. I guess it's just, if you want to complain about Kevin and you watch Thursday Night Football, that gave you more reason to complain about Kevin. But Sundays have given us enough to complain about with Kevin that you don't have to add extra like this. And we don't got to act like Jamar Chase isn't a part of what's happening there in Cincinnati. Like, at no point did we ever think that the Browns would have a better offense than what Cincinnati has. So the idea that Joe Flacco gets traded there and is more productive, is not very shocking to me. I expected that he would be productive on some level in Cincinnati. I said as much in the video where we traded him. So, yeah, I don't really think that matters. Like, that shouldn't be why you want to fire Kevin. You should want to fire Kevin because of what you see on Sundays, not because something that you saw another team do, right? That's not really a great way to go about things. And again, what we've seen on Sunday over the last calendar year. That's more damning than like Joe Flacco throwing the ball to Jamar Chase 24 times and being very productive, in my opinion. All right, Kilo of League of Legends says this. Hey, Q, I had the thought come to me. I really feel like the Browns should trade for Chris Olave, a trade that gives me an Amari Cooper trade style vibes. I think considering we'd have to re-sign him, we also get a pick swap of sorts. Would that benefit us? Not only does it ease up the necessity to take a receiver in round one, but letting us get our left tackle of the future, but also gives us rookie quarterback room and wide receiver. Yeah, I mean, it really comes down to, like, do you think that Chris Olave can be a number one wide receiver in your offense? Because right now you're paying Jerry Jeudy to be number two wide receiver, right? So it doesn't make sense to bring somebody over just to kind of fulfill the same role that you're already paying Jerry Jeudy for. And you're probably not going to trade Jerry Jeudy anytime soon to try to get out of that. So, yeah, it really comes down to your evaluation of Chris Olave. Do you think he's a number one wide receiver? If you think that's the case, then, yeah, go ahead and trade for him. I'm not going to sit here and act like I watched enough New Orleans Saints football to know whether that is true of Chris Olave. So I'm pretty neutral on the ideal of moving for him because I don't really have an opinion on whether he could be a number one wide receiver or not. Again, I'm not watching a ton of Saints football in my free time. So, you know, it comes down to that. If the Browns can get their hands on a young number one wide receiver potential prospect and extend them this offseason, that would be a good scenario for the Browns. Does Chris Olave fit that mold? That's a different question for somebody else to answer who has more information on that. But the basic bones of the idea of a trade for Chris Olave, I think, are fine. The logic behind it is fine. It's just, does Chris Olave fit that description to you? I think is the bigger question. We're going to take another question, but before I do that, got to thank my sponsor for today, Sleeper. All right, it's pick time on Sleeper. We're going to go through my picks of the week here. I have Browns versus Dolphins picks to go through for this week's contest. All right, so my first one is Dillon Gabriel over 29.5 pass attempts. This is a dicey one because I do think that Quincy's going to get the ball a lot in this game. I think 35 is the magic number in the offense to be able to have a level of success that's necessary to put up points to win this game. I think I don't think there's a I think there's a non-zero chance that this becomes a higher scoring affair than people, or at least to win the game, you're going to have to score more points than people are assuming coming into it. For the same reason, I'm going to say Dillon to win this game is probably going to have to go over 175 yards. David Achane from Miami is my Miami pick here. 4.5 receptions. He's the reception leader right now for the Miami Dolphins, so I feel comfortable about him getting the ball a ton in this game. And then Harold Fannin, 4.5 receptions in this game. He has not gone under 4 targets in a game all season. He's coming off of a 10-target game in Pittsburgh last week. I expect him to get the ball a ton more. But those are my picks. If you want to join the fun, make sure you join Sleeper with promo code Worst Take. Get a $100 up to $100 match on up to $100, and then they're doing a $20 promo code as well. So make sure you check that out. Y'all have a great day and continue to watch the video. Royal says, do you think Dillon can throw the ball deep downfield if he has decent protection? I have no clue. Here. I know what Dillon was able to do in college, which is, like I made this point about DTR, where when you look at DTR's college numbers, it demonstrated that he was a poor deep ball thrower in college. So you should not expect DTR at any point to be good at throwing deep balls. When you look at Dillon's numbers with throwing the ball downfield in college, he is significantly better than like somebody like DTR was. He was actually a really effective downfield thrower. But there's a world of difference in being an effective downfield thrower in college and being an effective downfield thrower in the NFL. It's just way different. So with Dillon, I'm not going to assume that he can't do it. But what I will say is that I have not seen him even really try to do it. And when he has, it hasn't been accurate. Now, most of the times he's thrown downfield has been like under duress or throwaway. So I don't feel like we've gotten an accurate gauge there. But that's the biggest question about Dillon Gabriel in the NFL. It's been 2 games. I will be lenient in these first 2 games because I went on record and said I thought Joe Flacco should have been the starter until week 6. A take, by the way, that people are now like, oh, we should have never traded Joe Flacco. I got crucified, by the way, for saying that we should stick with Joe Flacco till week 6. And it's week 6 or week 7. Joe Flacco has a big game, obviously under different circumstances, as I mentioned before. And people are like, oh, man, we love Joe Flacco. We should have never traded Joe. Just so wishy-washy at times, y'all. Like, damn. But in all seriousness, that's the biggest question about Dillon Gabriel. Can he throw the ball downfield? These first 2 weeks, I'll give him a bit of a pass because I didn't want him in there anyways, right? I wanted Joe Flacco out there instead of him. I thought that a Brian Flores defense and a Mike Tomlin defense is just a lot to ask a rookie quarterback to really step up from. But this week, I think there are going to be opportunities for him to throw downfield. And I'm going to talk about it more in a video that I'm going to post on Sunday. But I think that this game right here is a really big opportunity for Dillon Gabriel to really show us what he can do as the quarterback, because I think the last 2 weeks, because it's been a Mike Tomlin defense, because it's been a Brian Flores defense, they've been in protect mode with Dillon Gabriel, where they're not trying to really unleash and let him do what it is that he wants to do. They're trying to just like keep him under wraps. And I think this week they're going to kind of let him, I don't know if let him cook is the right word because he might not cook. I don't know how good Dillon Gabriel is, right? We all don't. But they're going to let him kind of run more, right? And be less restricted. That's the better way to put it. Less restricted in the offense this week. We'll see how he does with that. But I think it'll be a better week to really get a handle on what Dillon can and cannot do, because these first 2 weeks, I think they were just in protective mode with him. DSSD says this: Hey Q, hypothetically speaking, if we draft the quarterback with our first round pick and there is a receiver, tackle, slot corner that are basically equal on the draft board, who will we draft? Hey, look, man. The reality is that it's not every year you have a top first round pick, the ability to draft a quarterback that you really like with that top first round pick, and the access to take them, right? If you have that, you got to take advantage of that. I understand that there are other issues on the team that you would like to get solved in a perfect world for that quarterback, but you can't pass up opportunities to bring guys in at the quarterback position that you think can be difference makers down the line, right? Like you just can't, because it's not a given that you're going to get that opportunity. And even when you get that opportunity, it's not a given that there's going to be somebody in that draft class that will be that. Hell, even with this draft class, it's not a given that that's going to happen for the Cleveland Browns. But if we're talking about the hypothetical situation here where you do have a quarterback who you do think that you think he can be a difference maker, you got to take him. Like, that's just point. Like, you can find a slot corner in a different round. You can find a receiver in a different round. You might be able to even find a tackle in a different round. But if you identify a quarterback that you think is worth a early first round pick and you don't take him, somebody else does and has success with them, you're not going to ever forgive yourself for that kind of a mistake, right? You got to take the quarterback if you think the quarterback is there, right? Like, Atlanta is happy that they took Michael Penix despite having other issues on their roster and having Kirk Cousins on the roster. The Green Bay Packers had issues on their roster too when they took Jordan Love. There was a famous meltdown by somebody on the Pat McAfee show because they didn't take a defensive tackle when they took Jordan Love, and I think they're pretty happy with the choice of Jordan Love there, right? If you have an opportunity to bring somebody in the quarterback position you're convinced is worth a early pick and can be a difference maker in the long run, you take that guy. Maybe you don't play them right away because you don't have the perfect situation, but you try to develop that guy despite all of that, take that guy, and then you fix your problems, right? Now, it doesn't have to work this way. If you get into the draft and you don't think there's a quarterback in that draft worth that, or that's going to be that big of a difference maker, then don't do it. I always recommend it. Only take the quarterback in the first round if you are in love with the quarterback, right? But if you are in love with the quarterback, always take the quarterback. I don't care what else is going on with your team. You could be a Super Bowl contender with a franchise quarterback. You can be a dog shit team. Both extremes of those situations have taken quarterbacks that they've loved in the first round, and it has worked out, right? If you want to look at a team that was a Super Bowl contender, took quarterback, worked out, we're talking about Kansas City trading up for Pat Mahomes. We're talking about Green Bay getting Jordan Love, right? Both those situations worked out greatly for them. I'm sure there are more examples. Like Aaron Rodgers is the original example, right? And then you can look at teams that were dog due, took their quarterback and got better. I mean, Cincinnati is a prime example of that. Took Joe Burrow. They got to the Super Bowl in 2 years. You know, quarterback's going to change a lot. I'm not expecting it to be a catch-all. And I think also people have to remember, you have more picks than just your first round picks, right? You can solve other problems on your roster in the second round, in the third round, with free agency, with trades. You have more tools to your disposal to solve your tackle problem, your slot problem, your wide receiver problem, than just the draft or the first pick of the draft. So much emphasis gets there that we get tunnel vision. And, you know, if I say, hey, if there's a quarterback there, you got to take it. People go, well, we're not going to address these other problems. It's not that. It's kind of like that. Y'all ever see that tweet? It's like a meme where somebody says, I like pancakes. And then somebody will reply to you, well, why do you hate waffles? And it's like, that's not what anybody said, right? That's kind of how people react when you say the Browns should probably take a quarterback if they love a quarterback in the first round. I think there's nothing wrong with that. And I think that's the clear way to go about it, no matter who's in charge. JF says, do you think the team loses this week between the Dolphins and the Browns will subsequently lose their head coach after the game is over? Well, the Dolphins have already indicated that they're not going to fire Mike McDaniel. I think their owner talked to some reporter and said that that's not going to be the case. So we will see. The Browns have not offered any support of Kevin Stefanski this week, which is interesting, right? Like usually when the seat gets this hot for Kevin, Albert Breer's right there with the report saying ownership has no desire to move on. But there's also no reports indicating that the Browns are like this close to firing their coach. So I don't think it's going to happen this week, regardless of the result. I think some fans will definitely like, this is Kevin's last chance to win over any kind of favor. And look, I don't know if there's even that much of a coalition to keep him in at this point. But yeah, this might be his last chance to kind of demonstrate his value before people just completely make up their mind to the end of the season. But as far as him getting fired after the game, I don't think they're moving in that direction. I feel like there would be more noise if we're moving in that direction, but I don't think he's safe. Right. Like, I think we're somewhere in between he's going to get fired this week, which I don't think is the case, to he's going to get fired at the end of the season. Right. Like they're somewhere in between there. So no, despite the hype on it, right, where people are like, somebody's going to get fired after this game, it does not look like any coach is going to get fired regardless of the result here. At least right now. At the end of the year, probably. But right now, no. Twix says, what are your thoughts on Grant Delpit's statement of losing the feeling of what it's like to win? This is the dangers of losing a lot, right? We always underestimate the damage that losing has on the morale of a fan base and the morale of a team until we're going through it, right? It's why it's always easier to predict a team is going to have a losing season. But then when the team is actually going through that losing season, you see people who are like, oh, we're going to be a 5-win team, I'm okay with it, not be okay with it, because it's easy to be okay with a losing record before the season. But when you're actually going through it, it's a lot more painful than that, because it's more than likely how you're losing those games. They're going to bug you that nobody really thinks about that when they predict a team to lose like 10, 11 games, right? You predict a team to lose that many games. You're not thinking about how they're going to lose those games, but often the answer is it's not really a lot of acceptable ways to lose football games. So when you lose a bunch of them, well, I mean, it's going to have damage. Like, there's no way around it. There's no safe way to lose a bunch of games and keep things intact. And this is why I hate intentionally losing and tanking, because what it does is it puts you in situations to where you're damaging players who are good and making it so it's more likely that you have to get rid of them to fix the problem. And those players end up being good somewhere else because those teams aren't burdened with the heavy burden of losing. Like, it creates a burden. I don't think we appreciate that enough. And that's why when you lose so much, stuff eventually is going to have to change regardless of how much of a plan you think you got. Low Joe says, we know that Gabriel has a pretty low ceiling. At what point should we just throw in Shadeur out there and see what happens? Want to figure out if he's worth investing in before the 2026 draft, right? I mean, I don't really think that should be the priority. Like, your evaluation on Shadeur should not affect what you're going to do in the first round. And it's no disrespect to Shadeur. It's just he's a 5th round pick, right? If you thought that highly of Shadeur, you should have drafted him in the first round. And then that would obviously affect what you would do in the first round next year. But they don't. Whether we agree with that or not, that's the reality, right? They don't think that highly. So I don't think a 5th round pick's evaluation is that big of a priority for this team before going into the 2026 draft. That being said, at what point should we just throw Shadeur out there? Look, give Shadeur the best chance possible to be ready. So whenever you're convinced that he's at a point that he can go out there and, give the team a reasonable chance to win, right? Like, right now with Dillon Gabriel, is he playing amazing quarterback? Is it amazing quarterback play? No, but he's not turning the ball over, and you're getting at least some chance to win when he's out there, right? Don't throw Shadeur out there if it's clear that he's not going to give you a chance to win. But if you get to that point at some point, yeah, throw him out there. Why not? But that's going to be it for Q&A. Y'all have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.